So why did Vladimir Putin launch an invasion of Ukraine?
Is it because the only way he knows how to shore up domestic support is by periodically bombing civilian population?
No.
Is it because he has expansionist territorial ambitions based on his own bizarre anti-Bolshevik fantasies of Tsarist imperialism?
No.
Is it because of eastward NATO?
Let me just stop you there. It's because of pronouns. Any war can be a culture war if you try hard enough.
Well, I must be punished then, mustn't I? You're a naughty boy, Don't do it!
Something weird's going on in pundit land. As Russian armed forces rain missiles down on Kharkiv, a clique of politicians and commentators have taken to the opinion pages to argue that Putin's invasion of Ukraine was based on his calculation of Western weakness. Now, this weakness isn't being measured in the corrosion of international law since the War on Terror, or the impact of austerity on the state's capacity to do stuff, or our reluctance to target the offshore assets of Putin-backed oligarchs. Instead, the West is supposedly weak because trans and non-binary people exist.
Putin ain't woke. He is anti-woke.
Take this article by former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott about the West's supposed cultural self-harm. Blaming cultural Marxists and historically ignorant people, he took aim at the constant undermining of Western civilization, history, and national virtues. Abbott went on to deplore that these days the rights of men who want to be women routinely trump those of women who don't want to face unfair competition in sport. And then bizarrely claimed that Monty Python's Life of Brian couldn't be made today because of politically correct wowserism.
He's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy!
If that all seems like a big reach, at least Abbott made more sense than US Congressman Clay Higgins. Yes, that is his real name. You millennial leftists who never lived one day under nuclear threat can now reflect upon your woke sky. You made quite a non-binary fuss to save the world from intercontinental ballistic tweets. You what, mate? Thankfully, Spiked Online's Brendan O'Neill can be relied on to provide a slightly more coherent insight into the culture warrior worldview. In How Our Weak Elites Have Emboldened Putin, O'Neill argues, in the West, institutions are riddled with political correctness, incapacitated by wokeness, and increasingly incapable of being serious about almost any issue, including geopolitics. And in Russia, there is a leader who is a keen observer of this Western decay as he sees it. Now, if that sounds a lot like Brendan O'Neill is agreeing with Putin on what's wrong with the West, that's because, fundamentally, he does. In O'Neill's view, there's a direct relationship between Western decay and Russian opportunism. He takes Putin at his word when the Russian leader says the West is beset by socio-cultural disturbances. Where Russia under Putin is reviving pride and nostalgia for Russian history, at least the version of history that the Putin regime prefers, in the West they pursue the aggressive deletion of whole pages of their own history, Putin says. The West is too busy teaching that a boy can become a girl and vice versa to be able to defend its own traditions and truths, Putin chastises. And now we have British security bosses obsessing over pronouns as Putin spies more territory for the Russian Federation, fiddling while Ukraine burns. According to O'Neill, Russia is strong because it is regressive, nationalistic, and happy to fictionalize its own history. Whereas the West, wherever that is, has been weakened from within because of things like Rhodes Must Fall, and because there might be the tiniest bit of cultural movement towards accepting the fact that trans and non-binary people do, actually, for real, exist. To be fair, this isn't O'Neill's first go on the anti-trans hobby horse. If anyone's obsessing over pronouns, he might want to take a look a little bit closer to home. It's extra weird to endorse Putin's view of how we're all being supposedly hobbled by the gays and the gender nonconformists, when that's a core component of homophobic repression in Russia. In 2013, a law was introduced banning so-called gay propaganda. Russian law enforcement have refused to investigate attacks and threats against LGBT people. And in Chechnya, men who have been accused of being gay have been subject to unlawful detention, beatings, and even extrajudicial killings. Vladimir Putin's reactionary agenda explicitly attacks LGBT rights in the name of strengthening Russian national feeling by presenting LGBT people as the enemies of the nation itself. Sound familiar? The likes of Tony Abbott, Clay Higgins, and Brendan O'Neill think of themselves as being opposed to Russia, and geopolitically they are. But there's an uncomfortable alignment between their view of how nations are corrupted by minority interests and Vladimir Putin's. As one right-wing commentator on Steve Bannon's talk show said, for all Putin's faults,
the Russians people still know which bathroom to use.
Which is weird, because who had the cradle of civilization down as being the ladies' toilet?
Bitch, you better be joking.
And nobody seems to clock the irony of blaming the same marginalized groups attacked by Putin for his invasion of Ukraine. It would be like if Allied pundits pinned the German invasion of Poland in 1939 on our tolerance of Jewish people. War has become a grotesque opportunity for the baldest men alive, if not follically, then spiritually, to project their macho fantasies of cultural dominance onto the country as a whole.
War. War. It's war. War it is.
Which, funnily enough, is also Putin's favourite pastime.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
The fact is, reactionary libertarians aren't actually opposed to authoritarian strongmen. They just wish it was their authoritarian strongmen in charge. So maybe it's not lily-livered millennials and soft-palmed NBs serving Putin's interests in the West. Maybe it's his anti-woke fanboys.